Welcome back to Tina Romance Library, where powerful alphas fall hard, and the women they underestimate change everything. Every story here is complete, immersive, and emotion-driven. No cliffhangers, no rushed endings, just full romances you can sink into. Today's story? She was exiled, underestimated, and paired with a pregnant war dog so naturally, she ended up reforming an entire werewolf kingdom. Between outlawing Omega abuse, melting an ancient mountain of injustice, and adopting the most opinionated dog alive, Rebecca accidentally becomes unstoppable. Turns out when a kingdom tries to erase you, the universe sometimes hands you power, purpose, and a wolf who steals the king's side of the bed. So if you love possessive alphas, strong heroines who don't beg, slow burn tension, emotional payoffs, and stories that actually finish, you're in the right place. I need you to join the pack right now by subscribing. Leave a like if you enjoy immersive romance, and settle in because once the story begins, we don't stop until the ending. Now, let's get into it. I found her dying in the snow. Not just any snow, the kind that cuts through fur and bone, the kind that turns breath into glass in your lungs. A blizzard so vicious it had sent every living soul in the northern reach scrambling for shelter hours ago. Everyone except me. Because when you're a rejected Omega, when your own pack has already decided you're as good as dead, you stop caring about things like frostbite and frozen limbs. You stop caring about a lot of things. I was supposed to be in the Omega quarters, that drafty, forgotten corner of the pack house where they dump the broken ones, the weak ones, the ones who didn't present strong enough to matter. I was supposed to be grateful for the thin blanket and the watery soup they pretended was charity. But gratitude tastes like ash when you're watching yourself disappear one day at a time, so I'd slipped out. Into the storm. Into the cold. Maybe I was looking for an ending. Maybe I was just looking for something that felt real. That's when I heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the wind. Low, desperate. The kind of whimper that comes from a creature who knows death is close and is begging for one more minute, one more breath. I should have kept walking. Any sane person would have. But I've never been good at doing what I should. I found her collapsed against the northern gate, the one we're forbidden to use, the one that leads to the old territories, to the wild lands no pack has claimed in generations. She was massive, even folded in on herself like that. A war dog. I'd only seen them from a distance before, those legendary beasts who fought alongside the ancient alphas, whose loyalty was supposed to be unbreakable. Her fur was matted with ice and blood, her sides heaving with the effort of breathing. And she was pregnant. I could see it even through the snow gathering on her body, the swell of her belly, the way she'd curled around it protectively even as she lay dying. Her eyes found mine, dark, pleading, not for herself, never for herself. My hands were already moving before my brain caught up, reaching for her, trying to drag her toward shelter even though she outweighed me 3 times over, even though touching a war dog without permission was forbidden, even though helping anything, anyone, when you're already condemned is the kind of stupid that gets you killed faster. The pack house door was right there, 20 feet away, locked, barred. I'd never been allowed through it. Omegas use the side entrance, the servant's entrance, the one that reminds you with every step exactly what you're worth. But she was dying. They were dying her and whatever pups she carried. My fist hit that forbidden door so hard I felt something crack. Maybe the wood, maybe my knuckles. I didn't care. The wind screamed, the war dog's breathing rattled, and somewhere deep in my chest, something that had been quiet for so long started to roar. By dawn, either they would both be dead, or the kingdom would never be the same. The door didn't open. Of course it didn't. Why would it? I was Rebecca Thorndike, the name that used to mean something in this kingdom, back when I wore the royal healer's crest, back when alphas and betas alike would bow their heads when I entered a room, back when my hands could coax life back into dying bodies, when my knowledge of herbs and bones and blood made me invaluable. That was before they called it dark magic. Before they decided that an Omega shouldn't be able to heal the way I did, shouldn't understand the body's secrets like I did, shouldn't have power that made alphas uncomfortable. Before the whispers started whispers that turned into accusations, accusations that turned into a trial that was over before it began. They didn't need evidence. They didn't need proof. They just needed an excuse to take away everything I'd built, everything I'd earned with my own 2 hands and a mind sharper than any blade. The exile was swift, brutal, efficient. One day I was the king's own healer, trusted with the lives of his family, his warriors, his court. The next I was stripped of my title, my quarters, my dignity, cast down into the Omega wing like a piece of rotted meat. Not killed, they were too civilized for that, too concerned with their precious image, but death would have been kinder than what they did instead. They erased me, made me a ghost in the very halls where I'd once saved lives. And I knew gods. I knew it wasn't an accident. Someone wanted me gone. Someone powerful enough to orchestrate the accusations, to ensure the trial was a farce, to make certain I'd never practice healing again. I just didn't know who, or why. Not yet. But I'd felt their eyes on me in those final days, watching, waiting, making sure I understood that this wasn't just about magic or tradition or Omega limitations. This was personal. My knuckles were bleeding now, still pressed against that unyielding door, and the irony wasn't lost on me. A healer who couldn't heal herself, an Omega with no pack, a woman with nothing left to lose, begging for entry into the one place that had already made it clear she would never belong. The war dog's breathing was getting worse, shallower, the spaces between each breath growing longer. I spun back to her, dropping to my knees in the snow that was already halfway to burying us both. Her eyes were glazing over, that terrible fog of death creeping in from the edges, but she was still looking at me, still holding on. "I've got you," I whispered, even though it was a lie. Even though I had nothing, no supplies, no shelter, no authority to requisition help, even if anyone would listen to a disgraced Omega screaming into a blizzard. My hands moved on instinct, checking her pulse, feeling the pups shifting inside her. Still alive, but not for long. Not in this cold. Not without intervention. I'd delivered dozens of difficult births in my time as royal healer. I knew what this kind of labor looked like. Knew that she'd started contracting hours ago. Knew that something had gone wrong. Knew that she'd dragged herself here to this specific door, this forbidden gate, for a reason. War dogs didn't collapse randomly. They were guided by something deeper than instinct, by bonds we'd forgotten, by oaths older than the kingdom itself. She'd come here because she knew. Somehow, she knew that on the other side of this door there was someone who could help. She just didn't know that the person she'd found was broken, powerless, already condemned. I pressed my forehead against her massive shoulder, feeling the ice crystals scrape my skin, feeling her heart thunder weakly beneath all that fur and muscle. "I don't know if I can save you," I said, and my voice cracked on the words. "But I swear to you, I swear on everything I've lost, I will die trying." The wind howled its answer. The door stayed closed. And somewhere in the darkness of the pack house beyond, I could feel them. The ones who'd destroyed me. The ones who were probably watching even now, waiting to see if this would finally be the thing that killed me. Let them watch. I wasn't done yet. I wasn't always this desperate. There was a time when my biggest concern was whether the royal apothecary had restocked the elderflower tincture, or if the head cook would let me commandeer his kitchen for distilling essences. A time when I wore clean clothes that fit, when I slept in a bed with actual blankets, when people said my name with respect instead of spitting it like a curse. That time feels like someone else's life now. I came to the capital at 16, younger than most, but I'd already been apprenticing with my grandmother for 8 years by then. She was the one who taught me that healing wasn't just about memorizing which herb stopped bleeding or which poultice drew out infection. It was about listening. To the body, to the blood, to the things people didn't say out loud. She taught me to see patterns where others saw chaos, to find answers in symptoms that baffled everyone else. She also taught me that being gifted as an Omega meant walking a razor's edge every single day of your life. "They'll use you," she'd said, her gnarled hands sorting through dried lavender, her eyes sharp despite her age. "They'll take everything you can give and call it their due. But the moment you know too much, the moment you become inconvenient, they'll destroy you, and they'll sleep just fine afterward." I thought she was being dramatic. Bitter from her own disappointments, maybe. I thought if I was just good enough, invaluable enough, they'd have no choice but to see me as more than my designation. I was so goddamned young. The king's own physician noticed me first. I'd been working in the lower city, treating dock workers and merchants, anyone who couldn't afford the official healers. I'd developed a reputation for handling the cases no one else wanted, the infections that wouldn't heal, the fevers that wouldn't break, the injuries everyone said were hopeless. When the physician's daughter fell ill with a wasting sickness that had their entire medical staff baffled, someone whispered my name. I cured her in 3 days. Within a week, I had the royal crest pinned to my chest and quarters in the palace itself. Within a month, I was the youngest healer ever appointed to the king's personal staff. Within a year, I was the one they called when nothing else worked. I should have been more careful. Should have remembered my grandmother's warning. Should have kept my head down and my mouth shut. But I'd never been good at that. It started small. Little inconsistencies in the medical records I reviewed. A council member who'd supposedly died of heart failure, but whose symptoms didn't match. A general who'd wasted away from a mysterious illness that looked an awful lot like mercury poisoning. A rival to the throne who'd succumbed to what they called bad luck, but whose death I could trace back to a specific compound if I looked hard enough. I started keeping my own records. Quietly. Just notes, really. Patterns I was noticing. Questions I wanted to ask someone I trusted, except I didn't trust anyone. Not really. Not in a place where power shifted like sand, and loyalty was a commodity bought and sold. I should have burned those notes. Instead, I made the mistake of taking them to the High Council. I thought they'd want to know. Thought they'd be grateful for my diligence, my attention to detail. Thought I was doing the right thing. I walked into that chamber with my evidence carefully organized, my arguments rehearsed. I walked out with guards on either side of me and my entire world crumbling. The trial was a spectacle. They made sure of that. Held it in the great hall where everyone could watch, where every pack member with enough status to matter could see the Omega who'd gotten too big for her designation brought down exactly as she deserved. They didn't address my findings, didn't even acknowledge them. Instead, they talked about dark magic, about unnatural abilities, about how an Omega shouldn't be able to diagnose things that eluded alpha physicians, shouldn't be able to cure what others couldn't, shouldn't be able to see through the careful lies that held the kingdom together. They made me the villain in a story I hadn't even known I was part of. The head of the council, Alpha Cornelius, a man whose life I'd saved twice, looked down at me from his raised seat like I was something rotting he'd found on his shoe. Rebecca Thorndyke, you are found guilty of practicing forbidden arts and exceeding your station. Your title is stripped. Your belongings are forfeit. You will be remanded to the Omega quarters for the remainder of your natural life, prohibited from practicing healing in any form. Be grateful we are showing mercy. Mercy. That's what they called it when they took everything I was and left me breathing. When they made me a cautionary tale for any other Omega who might forget their place. When they erased 8 years of service like it had never existed. I didn't cry during the trial. Didn't beg. Didn't give them the satisfaction. But later, in the Omega quarters in that cramped, cold room that smelled like mildew and despair, I shattered. I broke so completely I wasn't sure I'd ever find all the pieces. That was 8 months ago. 8 months of learning what it meant to be invisible, to shuffle through the servant corridors with my eyes down, to eat whatever scraps they bothered to send down, to watch my body grow thinner and my mind grow sharper with a rage I had nowhere to put. 8 months of hunger that never quite killed me, of cold that settled into my bones, of loneliness so profound it felt like drowning. The other Omegas avoided me. Whether out of fear or disgust I didn't know. Didn't matter. I was contaminated now. Dangerous. The kind of failure that might be contagious. So I survived alone. Developed my little rituals. My small ways of holding on to sanity. I counted the cracks in my ceiling. There were 47. I memorized the guard rotation. They changed shifts at dawn and dusk. And there was a 6-minute window where the east corridor was unwatched. I hoarded candle stubs so I could have light after dark, because the darkness in that place felt like it had teeth. And I ate whatever I could get my hands on. The bread they sent down was usually 3 days old at minimum. Sometimes it had spots of mold creeping across the crust, little fuzzy continents of green and white. The first time I'd stared at one of those spots, I'd had a whole internal debate about dignity and self-respect, and how far I'd fallen. My stomach had growled loud enough to echo off the walls. I'd picked off the worst of the mold, and eaten the rest. If it doesn't growl back, it's probably safe, I'd muttered to myself, and then laughed this sharp, slightly unhinged sound that scared me a little. But it was either laugh or cry, and I'd done enough crying. Now it was routine. Check the bread for actual movement. If nothing was actively crawling, it was dinner. I'd become very good at lowering my standards. But even in that gray, suffocating existence, I didn't stop thinking, didn't stop analyzing. Somewhere in the palace above me, someone had orchestrated my fall with surgical precision. Someone had wanted me silenced badly enough to risk exposing themselves if I'd looked closer. Someone who had the power to manipulate the High Council, to fabricate charges, to ensure I'd never be believed. I kept a mental list of suspects, added to it, revised it, tried to find the pattern, the connection, the motive. It was the only thing that kept me sane. The knowledge that this wasn't over, that they might have taken everything from me, but they hadn't managed to take my mind, my ability to see what others missed. And some night, when I was strong enough, clever enough, desperate enough, I'd find out who'd done this. I'd make them answer for it. But first I had to survive, had to outlast them, had to prove that you can't kill someone by pretending they're already dead. So I ate the moldy bread. I counted my cracks. I waited for my moment. I just never expected that moment to arrive in the form of a dying war dog and a blizzard that felt like the end of the world. Some opportunities don't knock. They collapse bleeding at your feet and dare you to be brave enough to answer. The war dog's eyes were the color of amber held up to sunlight, and they were fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. I'd stopped beating on the door. My hands were numb anyway, useless and clumsy with cold. The blizzard had gotten worse, or maybe I'd just been out in it long enough that it felt worse, that the distinction between wind and world had blurred into one screaming white void. The pack house loomed behind that locked door, warm and indifferent, and I could almost feel the heat bleeding through the cracks. So close, completely unreachable. The war dog made a sound low in her throat, not quite a whimper, not quite a growl. A question, maybe, or a plea. I dropped back to my knees beside her, my healer's instincts overriding every other thought. My hands were already moving across her body, checking, assessing, cataloging injuries even as my rational mind screamed that this was pointless, that I had no supplies, no shelter, no authority, no hope of saving her. But hope had never been particularly good at listening to rational thought. She was enormous up close. Her shoulder came up to my chest even with her lying down, and her paws were the size of dinner plates. War dogs were bred for battle, stronger than wolves, smarter than hounds, loyal beyond death itself. The old stories said they could sense their alpha's heartbeat from miles away, that they'd throw themselves on blades meant for their bonded warrior, that they'd guard corpses for weeks rather than abandon their post. They were supposed to be extinct. The last war dog had died 3 generations ago, or so the histories claimed. Their bloodlines had thinned and failed, unable to adapt to a kingdom that valued political maneuvering over honest combat. They belonged to an older world, a fiercer one, a world where bonds meant something more than convenience. Yet here she was, solid and dying beneath my hands, and she was wearing a collar. My fingers found it beneath her thick fur leather, aged and supple, with metal plates worked into the band. I brushed away the snow and ice that had accumulated there, squinting in the dim light. Royal markings. The crowned wolf crest stamped into every plate, along with symbols I recognized from the oldest texts in the palace library. Symbols that designated bloodline and purpose. This wasn't just any war dog. This was a royal war dog, one that should have been guarded, treasured, protected at all costs, one that should have been somewhere warm and safe, not collapsing in a blizzard at a forbidden gate. My hands continued their examination, and that's when I felt it. The swell of her abdomen, the firm, unmistakable shape of life waiting to be born. "Oh gods," I breathed. "You're pregnant." She made that sound again, and this time I understood it. Confirmation, desperation, a mother's fear that transcended species. I pressed gently, feeling for position, for number. At least 3 pups, maybe 4. Positioned wrong, I could tell that much, even without proper light or tools. She'd been in labor for hours, maybe longer. Should have delivered by now. Something was stopping it, blocking it, and she was losing blood. Not from labor, from something else. I traced the wet patches in her fur, the places where the snow had melted into pink slush. Found the wounds on her left flank, 3 of them, deep, deliberately placed. Claw marks, not from a fight, from an execution. Someone had attacked a pregnant royal war dog and left her to die in a blizzard. Someone had looked at this magnificent creature, this living piece of history, this mother carrying the future of her bloodline, and decided she was disposable. The rage that swept through me was so fierce it burned away the cold. My hands were shaking as I examined the wounds more closely, and that's when I smelled it. Faint, familiar. A scent that triggered every alarm my training had ever installed. Nightshade derivative, mixed with silver dust. A combination specifically designed to prevent healing, to ensure that even a scratch became a death sentence. Royal toxin. I knew because I'd studied it. Because part of my training as royal healer had included understanding poisons, both how to treat them and, more importantly, how to recognize when they'd been used. This particular blend was restricted, controlled. Only certain people had access to it, and all of them lived in the palace. Someone with power had done this. Someone who wanted this war dog dead badly enough to use poison reserved for executing traitors. The pieces were clicking together in my mind, forming a picture I didn't want to see. A royal war dog, pregnant and poisoned, dragging herself through a blizzard to reach this specific gate. Not the main entrance, not the healer's wing. This gate, the forbidden one. The one that led to the old territories, to the wild places, to the parts of the kingdom we'd been taught to avoid. She'd been running from something, or to something, or both, and now she was dying. And I was the only thing standing between her and the dark. I should walk away. That was the smart choice, the safe choice. Helping her meant touching a royal animal without permission, meant acknowledging that I still had healing knowledge, still had the ability to diagnose and treat, meant putting myself directly in the path of whoever had done this, because they'd know. Eventually they'd know, and they'd finish what they'd started 8 months ago. They'd make sure I didn't survive a second time. But if I walked away, if I left her here to freeze and bleed and die alone, if I let those pups die without even trying, then what was I? What had they turned me into? I'd lost everything. My title, my position, my dignity, my future. But I hadn't lost this. I hadn't lost the core of who I was beneath all the things they'd stripped away. I was a healer. It wasn't what I did. It was what I was. In my bones. In my blood. In the part of me that couldn't be exiled or humiliated or starved into silence. I'd survived 8 months of systematic erasure. I'd eaten moldy bread and counted ceiling cracks, and swallowed my rage day after day after day. I'd survived by becoming smaller, quieter, less. But I wouldn't survive becoming cruel. I couldn't look at suffering and turn away just because helping was dangerous. Couldn't let fear make me into the kind of person who valued her own skin more than another's life. If I did that, then they'd won. Really won. Not just my exile, but my soul. And I'd be damned if I gave them that. "All right," I said, my voice rough in the screaming wind. "All right, we're doing this." I stripped off my thin cloak. It wasn't much. Barely more than a rag, really, but it was all I had. I pressed it against her wounds, trying to slow the bleeding even as I knew the poison was already in her system, already spreading. I needed heat, needed shelter, needed supplies I didn't have and couldn't get. The door was still locked. The pack house was still warm and unreachable on the other side. But there was another option, a worse option, a dangerous option, the old healer's cottage. It had been abandoned for years, tucked away in the forest beyond the wall. My grandmother had told me about it once, how it had belonged to the pack's first healer, back when the kingdom was young, how it had been left to decay after she died, because no one wanted to live that far from the main compound, how it was probably falling apart by now, if it was still standing at all. It was a 30-minute walk in good weather. In this blizzard, with a dying war dog I'd have to somehow drag or carry, it might as well be on the moon, but it was the only chance we had. I looked down at the war dog. Her breathing was shallower now. Her eyes were starting to glaze. She was fading, and fast. "You have to help me," I told her. "I can't carry you. You're going to have to walk, just a little farther. Can you do that?" For a moment, nothing. Then, with effort that I felt in my own chest, she lifted her head, nodded once. War dogs understood speech. I'd forgotten that. Or maybe I'd never really believed it until now. "Good girl," I whispered, and the tears that froze on my cheeks weren't from the cold. "Come on then. Let's go find somewhere warm to have these babies." I helped her stand, or tried to. Mostly I just braced myself against her weight as she fought her way upright, shaking, swaying, but vertical. She took one step, then another, each one an act of will over a body that wanted to surrender. We left the pack house behind, left the locked door and the warm lights and the people who'd already decided we were both as good as dead. We walked into the blizzard, and if I'd known what was waiting for us in that old cottage, if I'd known what I was about to unleash, I might have turned back. But I didn't know, so I kept walking. The cottage appeared through the white like a ghost, remembering how to be solid. I almost missed it, would have walked right past if Lucy hadn't stopped, her massive head swinging toward a break in the trees I hadn't noticed. For a moment I thought she was giving up, choosing this spot to lie down and die. Then I saw it, a structure barely distinguishable from the snow-covered forest around it, its roof sagging, its walls more suggestion than certainty. My grandmother's stories hadn't mentioned how small it was, or how it looked like a strong wind might finish what time had started. But it had walls, a door, something that might still count as a roof. It was more than we had. Getting Lucy up the 3 steps to the entrance took everything we both had left. She collapsed the moment we crossed the threshold, her body hitting the floor with a thud that shook dust from the rafters. I slammed the door shut behind us, and the sudden absence of wind felt like stepping into another world. Still cold, I could see my breath ghosting in the air, but not the killing cold, not the cold that turned blood to ice. The cottage was a single room, bare except for a stone hearth, a broken table, and what might have once been a bed frame in the corner. Moonlight filtered through cracks in the walls, painting silver stripes across the floor. No supplies, no blankets, no firewood, but there was wood in the walls themselves, in the broken furniture. I grabbed the table, yanked at one of its legs until it splintered free, found 2 more pieces that looked dry enough to burn. My hands were so numb I could barely feel them, but I managed to arrange the wood in the hearth, managed to coax a spark from the ancient flint I found on the mantel. The flame caught. Held, grew. Heat. Blessed, impossible heat. I turned back to Lucy, and my healer's assessment was grim. She was worse. Blood was still seeping from her wounds despite my makeshift bandaging. Her breathing was rapid and shallow. And the pups, I could see the contractions rippling across her distended belly, but nothing was progressing. Something was wrong. The poison, maybe, or the position, or both. I knelt beside her, pressing my hands to her side, trying to feel what I couldn't see. She was burning up despite the cold, her body fighting the toxin even as it tried to bring new life into the world. "I don't have anything," I told her, my voice cracking. "No instruments, no medicines, nothing to counteract the poison or ease the birth. I don't know if I can." Her eyes found mine, and something happened. It wasn't like anything I'd experienced before. Not a voice, exactly. Not words. But suddenly there was presence in my mind that wasn't my own. Warm, ancient, exhausted beyond measure but still holding on. Rebecca. My own name, spoken inside my head in a voice that felt like summer sun and old stone and loyalty carved so deep it had become identity itself. I jerked back, gasping. "What? Don't be afraid." The presence steadied, took shape. "I am Lucy, and I chose you." "Chose me?" My thoughts were chaos, but she seemed to hear them anyway. "I don't understand. War dogs don't, they can't." "We bond." Something like amusement flickered through the connection, gentle despite the pain I could feel radiating from her. "The stories your kind tell have forgotten so much. We choose our humans, our pack, our purpose. I chose you the moment you opened that door. But I didn't, the door was locked. Yet, you tried." Her presence wrapped around my mind like a blanket, and suddenly I wasn't in the cottage anymore. I was standing in the royal kennels. Except they weren't kennels, they were chambers, spacious and warm, decorated with tapestries showing war dogs and their bonded warriors fighting side by side. Lucy was younger here, her coat glossy and unmarred. She was being fitted with that leather collar, the one with the royal crests, while a woman I didn't recognize whispered oaths in the old tongue. The vision shifted. A council chamber, late at night. Voices speaking in urgent whispers. I recognized Alpha Cornelius, the bastard who'd presided over my trial. And there, beside him, 2 other council members whose names I knew. They were bent over documents, pointing, arguing. "The Omega bloodlines are the key," Cornelius was saying. "The old magic runs strongest through them. That's why they're dangerous." "And the war dogs?" This from one of the others, a sharp-faced woman I'd treated once for a fever. "Already handled. The last breeding pair will be dealt with tonight. Can't risk them bonding with the wrong person when the convergence comes." "And the Thorndike Omega?" "Being handled. She knows too much, sees too much. Once she's properly discredited, we'll ensure she doesn't survive the winter." The vision shattered. I was back in the cottage, gasping, my heart hammering against my ribs. Lucy's eyes were still locked on mine, and I could feel her exhaustion, her pain, but also her grim satisfaction. "You see now," she said. "You were chosen to be destroyed because you were chosen to be powerful. That's impossible." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't. The pieces were falling into place with horrible clarity. My exile hadn't been about dark magic or overstepping my station. It had been about removing me, specifically me, before something happened that would make me dangerous to them. The winter convergence, Lucy continued, and I felt her urgency spike. It happens once every 300 years, when the barriers thin, when old magic can find new vessels, when prophecies can be fulfilled or broken. What prophecy? Truth bearers will be born when winter swallows light. Children who cannot be lied to, who will see through every deception, every manipulation, every carefully constructed story the powerful tell to maintain their power. The contractions were getting worse. I could feel them through our bond now, the pain sharp and overwhelming. Lucy's strength was fading fast. My pups, she managed. They are the truth bearers. That's why they killed my mate. Why they poisoned me. Why they tried to ensure I'd die before I could deliver. But you made it here. You survived. Because I knew. Her presence was dimming, like a candle burning down to its last bit of wax. I knew there was an omega they'd tried to erase. I knew if I could reach you, if I could bond with you, the prophecy might still come true. The truth bearers need a guardian, someone who understands what it means to have power turned against you, someone who won't use them but will protect them. My hands were on her belly now, feeling another contraction grip and release. Lucy, I don't know how to deliver war dog pups. I don't know how to counteract royal poison. You are more than they allowed you to be. Her voice was fading, but there was steel in it still. You always were. That's why they feared you. Why they'll fear you more when this night is done. If you die, then you'll raise them anyway. The matter-of-fact way she said it made me want to laugh and cry at the same time. They're war dogs. They need someone who will keep them alive long enough to become what they're meant to be. Someone clever enough to hide them until the convergence completes. Someone stubborn enough to survive impossible odds. A pause, then something that felt like fondness. Someone foolish enough to try saving a dying stranger in a blizzard. That's not a qualification. That's a character flaw. Sometimes they're the same thing. Another contraction, stronger than the others. Lucy's body convulsed, and I felt her pain spike so sharply it drove the air from my lungs. We were running out of time. The pups needed to be born now, or they'd die inside her. And she might be bonded to me, might be sharing her memories and her purpose, but that didn't change the fact that I had no tools and no training in war dog midwifery and no idea how to save any of them. The fire crackled behind me. The wind howled at the walls. And somewhere in the palace, the people who'd orchestrated all of this were probably sleeping peacefully, confident that their problems had been neatly eliminated. I pressed my forehead against Lucy's, feeling her warmth, her fading strength, her desperate hope. Tell me what to do, I whispered. Trust yourself. Trust the bond. Trust that you were chosen for this moment not despite your exile, but because of what you learned from it. I learned how to survive on moldy bread and spite. Her mental voice carried something that might have been laughter if she'd had the strength for it. Spite is underrated. It's kept me alive this long. Well, that and the image of a softer bed once this is over. A softer bed? If I survive this, Lucy said with feeling, I demand a softer bed, silk cushions. Maybe some of those fancy herbed oils you nobles are always bathing in. This floor is murder on the spine. The absurdity of it, a dying war dog negotiating for luxury accommodations, cracked something open in my chest. I found myself laughing, this sharp edge of hysteria and determination, and something that might have been hope. Deal, I said. You survive this, I'll steal you the softest bed in the kingdom. Good. Her presence wrapped around mine, sharing strength she didn't have, offering comfort that cost her everything. Now help me bring my daughters into this world. Daughters. Truth bearers. The future wrapped in fur and prophecy. No pressure at all. I took a breath, steadied my hands, and reached for the healer I used to be, the one who'd saved lives everyone else had given up on, who'd seen patterns in chaos, who'd trusted her instincts even when they led her into danger. That healer wasn't gone. She'd just been buried under 8 months of survival. Time to dig her up. The first pup was Breach. I felt it through our bond before my hands confirmed it, the wrongness of the position, the way Lucy's body was trying to push but couldn't get the leverage it needed. In a normal delivery, I'd have instruments, space to maneuver. Help. Here I had blood-slicked hands and firelight and desperation. I need you to stay with me, I told Lucy, my voice steady, even though my heart was trying to beat its way out of my chest. This is going to hurt, more than being poisoned and stabbed. But there was trust in her mental voice, absolute faith that I wouldn't fail her. Gods, I hoped I deserved it. I reached inside, feeling for the pup's position, trying to guide it without causing more damage. Lucy's pain crashed through our bond like a wave, but she didn't flinch, didn't pull away. She'd survived worse than this. We both had. My fingers found a leg, then another. I worked carefully, trying to remember everything my grandmother had taught me about difficult births, trying to adapt what I knew about wolves and dogs and healing to this situation that was like nothing I'd ever faced. The pup was large, too large really, and Lucy's body was weakened by poison and blood loss and exhaustion. But she was also a war dog, bred for survival, built to endure. I pulled gently, adjusted, pulled again. The pup slid free in a rush of fluid and blood, and I nearly sobbed with relief. She was gray-furred and perfect, and utterly still. No. I cleared her mouth and nose, rubbing her tiny body with what was left of my cloak, trying to stimulate breathing. Come on, come on. Lucy's anxiety was a living thing in my mind, her fear for her daughter overwhelming even her own pain. The pup gasped, cuffed, drew in a breath that was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. 1, Lucy whispered. 3 more. 3 more. Gods have mercy. The second pup came faster, positioned correctly this time, sliding into my waiting hands like she'd been eager to meet the world, black-furred where her sister was gray, already mewling, already rooting toward her mother's warmth. I placed them both near Lucy's head where she could see them, where her presence could wrap around them even as her body prepared for the next contraction. That's when I heard the horses. The sound carried even through the blizzard hoofbeats, multiple riders, moving fast, coming this way. Lucy's head shot up, her ears swiveling. They found us. How? But even as I asked, I knew. War dogs could be tracked by those who knew the old ways, and whoever had poisoned Lucy would want to confirm the kill, would want to make absolutely certain that neither she nor her pups survived the night. The horses were getting closer. I could hear men's voices now, shouting orders over the wind. We need to move, I said, already knowing it was impossible. Lucy couldn't walk, the pups couldn't be moved, and there was nowhere to run anyway. Nowhere that would be safer than this falling-apart cottage in the middle of a blizzard. You need to fight, Lucy said, and I felt her gathering what little strength she had left, preparing to defend her children even if it killed her. I can't fight and deliver the rest of your pups. My hands were shaking now, from cold and fear and the realization that we were trapped, that I'd brought Lucy here thinking I could save her, but all I'd done was lead us both to a slightly different death. You can do both. Lucy's presence pressed against mine, insistent. You have magic, Rebecca. Real magic. The kind they exiled you for. The kind you've been afraid to touch since the trial. I'm not. But my protest died in my throat because she was right. The things I'd been able to do. The healing that had baffled other physicians. The way I could see into bodies and understand their secrets that hadn't been normal skill. It had been something older. Something that ran through certain bloodlines, showing up unexpectedly in Omegas who carried the genetic memory of wolves who'd been more than just wolves. Blood magic. The kind that required sacrifice. That took something from you even as it gave you power. The kind that had gotten healers killed throughout history because it was too effective, too powerful, too threatening to those who relied on conventional medicine and political control. I'd used it without fully understanding what I was doing. And when they'd noticed, when they'd realized what I was, they'd made sure I'd never practice again. The horses stopped outside. I heard men dismounting, heard steel being drawn, heard someone give an order I couldn't quite make out. Lucy contracted again, her body trying to push out the third pup while soldiers prepared to break down our door. I looked at my hands, at the blood already coating them, at the 2 tiny lives depending on me to bring their sisters safely into the world, at the mother who'd trusted me with everything. The door shattered inward. 3 soldiers poured through, weapons drawn, faces grim behind their scarves. Council soldiers judging by their armor. Professional killers sent to finish a job. They saw me first, then Lucy, then the pups. The Omega, one of them said, and I recognized his voice. He'd been one of the guards at my trial, had stood there silent while they'd stripped everything from me. She was supposed to be dead already. Oh, convenient, another said. 2 problems, 1 solution. The third one raised his sword. I don't remember deciding to act, don't remember choosing, but suddenly my bloody hands were pressed to the floor, and I was reaching for something I'd sworn I'd never touch again. The blood responded. Mine, Lucy's, the pups, all of it humming with life and power and the desperate will to survive. I pulled on it, shaped it, gave it purpose. The cost hit immediately, pain lancing through my chest, my vision blurring, something vital draining from me like water from a cracked cup. But the blood moved. It rose from the floor in tendrils that looked almost solid, almost real. The soldiers shouted, stumbling back. One of them swung his sword through a tendril, and it reformed instantly, wrapping around his wrist, yanking the weapon from his grip. "Witch!" he screamed. "She's a—" The tendril tightened. He dropped. The other two rushed me together, probably thinking that getting close would disrupt whatever I was doing. They were wrong. The closer they got, the more I could feel their blood, could sense the rhythm of their hearts, could find the pressure points that would drop them without killing them. Because I was a healer, even now, even doing this. I wouldn't become a murderer just because they'd tried to turn me into one. The blood magic lashed out, precise and controlled. It hit both soldiers in exactly the right spots, nerves that would paralyze without permanent damage, pressure that would render them unconscious but alive. They fell. The cottage was silent, except for Lucy's labored breathing and my own ragged gasps. The cost of using blood magic was devastating. I could feel my strength hemorrhaging away, could feel something fundamental cracking inside me. But Lucy was contracting again, and there were still 2 pups that needed to be born, and I'd be damned if I'd let her down now. I crawled back to her side, my limbs shaking, my vision dancing with black spots. Through our bond I felt her concern, her guilt that I'd had to spend myself this way. "Don't," I told her. "This was always going to cost something. Might as well be worth it." The 3rd pup came fast, as if she'd been waiting for the danger to pass before making her entrance. She was smaller than her sisters, russet-furred and already squirming with indignation at the undignified nature of birth. 3 down. 1 to go. But Lucy was fading fast. I could feel her slipping away, her body pushed beyond its limits. The poison was winning. The blood loss was too much. She'd held on this long through sheer will, but even will had its breaking point. "The last one," she whispered through our bond, and her mental voice was barely there. "She's stuck. The poison. It's made everything harder. I don't know if I can—" "You can." I pressed my hands to her belly, feeling for the pup. She was right. The last one was caught somehow, wedged in a position that Lucy's weakened body couldn't shift. Under normal circumstances, I'd try to manipulate it externally. But these weren't normal circumstances, and I was out of time. Outside, I heard more horses arriving. More soldiers. They'd sent backup, probably expecting resistance. They were about to get it. I looked at my hands, still covered in blood, still thrumming with the remnants of power I'd called up, still connected to something ancient and dangerous that I'd tried to leave behind. "I need more," I told Lucy. "More blood, more magic. Enough to bring your daughter into this world and keep the soldiers out long enough for you to recover. It will kill you." Not a question. A statement of fact. She could feel what the last working had cost me. Maybe. Probably. But if I don't try, we all die anyway. At least this way. 3 of your daughters survive. I touched each of the pups in turn. Gray. Black. Russet. Perfect. Precious. Worth dying for. That's something. That's a future. Rebecca. I was dead the moment they exiled me, Lucy. I've been a ghost for 8 months. Maybe this is what I was supposed to do with my haunting. I positioned my hands, ready to reach inside again, ready to pull on the blood magic one more time, ready to spend everything I had left. The door, what was left of it, burst open again. More soldiers. These ones prepared for resistance. They saw their fallen comrades and drew their weapons, faces hard with determination. I pulled on the magic. The pain was transcendent. I felt my nose start bleeding, tasted copper in my mouth, felt something in my chest crack like breaking ice. But the power came, stronger than before, fed by desperation and love, and the absolute refusal to let these pups die without meeting their mother. The blood rose around us like a shield, like a wall, like a living barrier between us and death. The soldiers charged it anyway. My hands found the last pup, found her position, started guiding her down and out even as my magic held back men with swords and murder in their eyes. I was in 2 places at once, inside Lucy, helping her daughter be born, and outside myself, maintaining a defense that was eating me alive from the inside out. The pup moved, shifted, started sliding free. The blood shield wavered. One of the soldiers broke through, his blade raised. Lucy lunged, her massive jaws closing around his arm. The soldier screamed. His companions fell back, suddenly remembering that war dogs were named that for a reason. The pup slipped into my hands. She was golden, not gray or black or russet, but pure spun gold, her fur catching the firelight like she'd been made of precious metal instead of flesh and blood. And when her eyes opened impossibly early, war dog pups shouldn't open their eyes for days, they were gold too. Pure metallic gold, bright as coins, ancient as prophecy. She looked at me, and the world exploded. It wasn't sound or light or any physical force. It was psychic, a shockwave of pure power that blasted outward from the golden pup in every direction. I felt it pass through me like wind through an open door, felt it carry something fundamental and undeniable. Truth. Raw, unfiltered, impossible to deny truth. The soldiers dropped like puppets with cut strings. Not dead, I could still hear them breathing, but unconscious, their minds overwhelmed by whatever the pup had just released. The cottage fell silent. I knelt there, holding a golden pup who was looking at me with eyes that seemed far too knowing, while her 3 sisters mewled and her mother's presence wrapped around all of us in exhausted triumph. "Truth-bearers," Lucy whispered. "I told you. When winter swallows light, they come, and they cannot be lied to." The golden pup made a small sound, almost like agreement. I started laughing, couldn't help it. This sharp, slightly hysterical sound that was equal parts relief and terror, and the kind of awe that comes from witnessing something that shouldn't be possible. 4 pups, 4 truth-bearers, born in a blizzard to a dying mother, and delivered by an exiled Omega, who'd just committed about 17 different kinds of forbidden magic. The winter convergence hadn't just begun. It had arrived with teeth and claws and eyes like molten gold. And somewhere in the palace, the people who'd tried to prevent this were about to discover that some prophecies can't be stopped, only survived. The Alpha King arrived with the dawn. I didn't hear him coming. Couldn't have, with the ringing in my ears and the blood pounding through my head and the way the world kept tilting sideways every time I tried to move. I was collapsed against Lucy's side, the 4 pups nestled between us, my hands still shaking from the magic I'd poured out. The unconscious soldiers were scattered around the cottage like broken toys, and I was fairly certain I was dying. The blood magic had taken too much. I could feel it the way my heart kept skipping beats, the coldness spreading through my limbs, the darkness creeping in at the edges of my vision. I'd spent everything to bring those pups into the world and keep them alive. There was nothing left. I'd made my peace with it. 4 lives for one seemed like decent mathematics. Lucy was recovering faster than I was, the war dog constitution already working to heal what the poison had damaged. She'd live. The pups would live. That was enough. Then the door, what remained of it, creaked open, and I looked up into the face of the most powerful man in the kingdom. Alpha King Joe Wellington was younger than I expected. Mid-30s maybe, though it was hard to tell with alphas. They aged differently, carrying their years with a kind of timeless strength. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that looked like he'd been running his hands through it and eyes the color of winter storms. He wore traveling clothes rather than royal regalia, and there was a sword at his hip that looked well used. He wasn't what I'd pictured when I'd heard stories of the king. I'd imagined someone older, harder, more like the council members who'd destroyed my life. But there was something in his face, as he took in the scene, the unconscious soldiers, the blood-covered Omega, the war dog and her impossible pups, that looked like recognition, like he'd been expecting this, or dreading it. His eyes found the golden pup, and I watched something crack open in his expression. "Gods above," he whispered. "It's true." He crossed the cottage in 3 strides, dropping to his knees beside us. Lucy growled, a low warning sound, but he didn't flinch, just held out his hand, palm up, in a gesture I recognized from the old stories, the way warriors used to greet war dogs, as equals, as honored allies. Lucy's growl faded. She sniffed his hand, then relaxed fractionally. "I felt it," the king said, and his voice was rough with something I couldn't name. The psychic surge. It hit me in the throne room, knocked me off my feet. I knew. He stopped, swallowed hard. I knew what it meant, that the convergence had begun, that the truth-bearers had been born despite everything we did to prevent it. Everything we did. My blood went cold. "You knew," I said, and my voice came out as a rasp. "You knew they were trying to kill her. To kill them." His eyes met mine, and I saw guilt there, raw and devastating. Not until it was too late. Not until I felt your blood magic and realized someone in my own council had sent assassins after a pregnant war dog and the Omega who was trying to save her. He looked at the unconscious soldiers. My soldiers. Following orders I never gave. Lord Drake. The name came from Lucy, projected into both our minds with enough force to make the king flinch. Images flooded with it, memories she was sharing, scenes she'd witnessed. Drake in the council chamber, orchestrating my exile. Drake giving orders to have Lucy's mate killed. Drake arranging for the poison, for the assassins, for every piece of the conspiracy that had led us to this moment. The king's face went white, then red, then settled into something cold and deadly that made me believe every story I'd ever heard about Alpha Kings and their capacity for violence. "How long?" he asked, and the question seemed to be directed at the universe rather than us specifically. "How long has he been moving against me? Against the kingdom?" The golden pup made a sound. All four of them did, actually a chorus of small voices that shouldn't have been able to do what happened next. The air in the cottage shimmered, and suddenly we were somewhere else. Not physically. We were still in the cottage, still surrounded by blood and birth and unconscious soldiers, but layered over reality was something else. A vision, a memory, a truth that couldn't be denied or explained away. We were in the council chamber. 5 years ago, judging by the look of the king younger, less worn, standing at the head of the table with the confidence of someone who believed his counsel served the kingdom's interests. Lord Drake was speaking. "The Omega bloodlines have always been stronger than we acknowledge, Your Majesty. The old magic runs through them, the healing, the sight, the connection to the ancient ways. If left unchecked, they could become a challenge to traditional Alpha authority. There are people," the younger king said, "under our protection. Of course. But protection requires the management. Certain precautions. We've been implementing them quietly for decades. Ensuring that the most powerful Omega lines don't produce offspring. That those who show unusual abilities are redirected into harmless pursuits." "Redirected how?" Drake smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Various methods. Exile for those who become inconvenient. Accidents for those who resist. You don't need to concern yourself with the details, Your Majesty. The council handles these matters so you can focus on more important things." The vision shifted. Fast-forwarded. Showed meeting after meeting where Drake slowly, carefully, built a web of control that the king never saw. Showed Omega healers being discredited. Showed potential bonds between Alphas and powerful Omegas being disrupted. Showed the systematic dismantling of everything that might threaten the council's grip on power. Showed my grandmother, younger and vibrant, standing before the council and warning them about the prophecy, about the winter convergence, about truth-bearers who would expose every lie the kingdom was built on. Showed Drake's face as he realized she had to be eliminated. Showed the accident that killed her 3 months later. The vision released us. I was back in the cottage, gasping, tears streaming down my face. My grandmother. They'd killed my grandmother because she'd tried to warn them, because she'd known what was coming, and had tried to prepare the kingdom instead of letting Drake and his cronies maintain their chokehold on power. The king looked like he was going to be sick. His hands were clenched into fists, his whole body rigid with fury so intense it was almost palpable. "I didn't know," he said, and his voice was shaking. "Gods help me. I didn't know. I trusted them. I thought—" He stopped, dragged a hand over his face. "I thought I was being a good king, delegating, letting experienced council members handle the details while I focused on external threats and trade agreements and keeping the peace. I didn't see what they were doing inside my own kingdom." "They made sure you didn't," Lucy said, her mental voice gentle, despite everything. "That was the point. Keep the king focused elsewhere while they consolidated power. Make him dependent on their guidance. Ensure that anyone who might tell him the truth was silenced before they could speak." The king looked at me, really looked at me. Took in my thin frame, my ragged clothes, the blood covering my hands and arms, the exhaustion in every line of my body. "Rebecca Thorndyke," he said. "The royal healer. The one they exiled for dark magic." His jaw clenched. "You question the poison records." "I found evidence of assassination," I said. "Brought it to the council. They called it dark magic and threw me into the Omega quarters to rot. While I signed the exile order without reading it thoroughly because Drake assured me it was a routine matter of an Omega overstepping their bounds." The king's voice was flat, dead. "I destroyed your life with my signature because I was too busy to ask questions." He wasn't wrong. And I could have hated him for it. Probably should have hated him for it. But the guilt in his eyes was real. The horror at what he'd enabled through ignorance was genuine. And standing in this cottage, surrounded by the evidence of how deeply the corruption ran, I couldn't muster the energy for hatred. They would have found another way, I said. If not the exile, then an accident. Like my grandmother, like Lucy's mate. They were thorough. That doesn't absolve me. The king reached out, hesitated, then gently touched the golden pup. She chirped at him, and I saw his expression soften for just a moment before the steel returned. I failed as a king, failed to protect my people, failed to see what was happening in my own council chamber, failed you, failed her. He looked at Lucy, failed everyone who should have been able to trust that their king would notice when his advisors were committing atrocities in his name. The golden pup chirped again. Her sisters joined in, and I felt something pass between them and the king. Not a vision this time. Something else. A judgment, maybe. Or an absolution. The king's shoulders sagged slightly. They forgive me, he said, wonder and pain mixing in his voice. Truth-bearers. They can see into hearts, can't they? See intentions as clearly as actions. And they're telling me I didn't know. That I'm guilty of blindness, not malice. Blindness can still kill people, I said, because someone needed to say it. Because the dead deserve to have their deaths acknowledged, even if the one responsible hadn't intended them. Yes. The king's eyes met mine, and I saw acceptance there. Responsibility. It can. It did. And I will spend the rest of my reign making amends for that. He looked around the cottage, at the unconscious soldiers, at the evidence of the battle that had taken place here. Starting now. Starting with ensuring that everyone who participated in this conspiracy answers for it. And that you, he focused on me again, that you are restored to your proper place, your title returned, your honor reclaimed. I laughed. Couldn't help it. The sound was harsh and brittle. I don't want my title back. I don't want to return to a palace full of people who watched me be destroyed and did nothing. I don't want to serve a king who... I stopped, took a breath. I don't want what I had before. That woman is dead. They killed her. Then what do you want? It was a fair question. One I hadn't let myself think about because wanting things when you're powerless is just another form of torture. I looked down at the 4 pups, at Lucy's exhausted but peaceful face, at my hands still stained with blood and magic. I want them safe, I said finally. Protected. Hidden until they're strong enough to survive what comes next. Because the moment Drake finds out they survived, he'll come for them again. And next time he won't send soldiers. He'll bring everything he has. Then we make sure he can't. The king stood, his decision made. You and Lucy and the pups come with me. Under my personal protection. No council oversight. No intermediaries. You report directly to me, and anyone who tries to harm you answers to me personally. Why would you do that? I'm nothing. A disgraced Omega with forbidden magic who just killed... I looked at the soldiers. Or maimed your own guards. You're the person who saved the future of this kingdom when everyone else tried to kill it. The king held out his hand. Not commanding. Offering. You're the woman who stood between prophecy and extinction, armed with nothing but spite and blood magic. You're exactly the kind of person I should have been protecting all along. I stared at his hand, at the offer implicit in the gesture. Trust. Alliance. A chance to matter again. It could be a trap. Could be Drake working through the king somehow. Could be another way to control me, to use me, to ensure that the truth-bearers never fulfilled their purpose. But the golden pup chirped. And through our bond, I felt Lucy's gentle encouragement. He's telling the truth, she said. His heart is clean, even if his kingdom isn't. I reached up, took the king's hand. His grip was warm, steady, strong enough to pull me to my feet when my legs wanted to give out. Your Majesty, I said, and my voice only shook a little. What happens now? King Joe Wellington looked down at 4 impossible pups and 1 dying but not dead Omega, and 1 war dog who should have been extinct, and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of an alpha who'd just realized his kingdom was built on lies, and who'd decided it was time to burn those lies to the ground. Now, he said, now we go home, and we have a very interesting conversation with my council. The council chamber had never been designed for war dogs. That became immediately apparent when Lucy padded through the grand doors, her massive frame making the ornate furniture look like children's toys. The pups were in a specially designed carrier strapped to her back, the king's own idea, implemented within an hour of our arrival at the palace. They rode like tiny royalty, peering out at the world with those unsettling, knowing eyes. I walked beside Lucy, wearing clothes that actually fit for the first time in 8 months. The king had seen to that too, along with a hot bath, a meal that didn't involve mold, and a physician to check the damage the blood magic had done to my body. Apparently I'd cracked 3 ribs, ruptured something in my chest cavity, and come within an hour of complete cardiac failure. Apparently I was also too stubborn to die properly. The physician had been impressed, and slightly terrified. The council chamber was full. Every seat occupied, every face turned toward us as we entered. Some looked confused, others looked furious. A few looked guilty, though whether that was because they'd known about Drake's conspiracy, or because they'd stood by while I was exiled, I couldn't tell. Drake himself sat in his usual place at the right hand of where the king would sit. He looked calm, composed. Like this was just another routine meeting. That composure cracked when he saw Lucy. "Impossible," he breathed, loud enough to carry in the sudden silence. "She's dead," the soldiers confirmed. "Your soldiers are currently in my dungeon," the king said, entering from the side door, awaiting trial for attempted murder, along with several other interesting charges we'll be discussing shortly. He took his seat at the head of the table, and the casual way he did it like this was just another day. Just another meeting somehow made the threat more potent. "Please, everyone, get comfortable. We're going to be here a while." Drake had recovered his composure. "Your Majesty, I don't know what that creature has told you, but that creature," the king said quietly, "is a royal war dog carrying the future of this kingdom in the pups on her back. You will address her with respect, or you will address me with your silence. Choose quickly." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Several council members shifted uncomfortably. Drake's jaw worked like he was chewing on words too dangerous to speak. "Now then." The king leaned back in his chair. "We're here to discuss treason. Specifically, the systematic conspiracy to undermine Omega bloodlines, eliminate war dogs, and suppress prophecies that inconvenient to certain members of this council. Rebecca, if you would?" This was my cue. We'd planned this on the ride back to the palace. The king wanted the truth laid bare, wanted every council member to see exactly what had been done in their name, or with their silent permission. I stepped forward, and gods, it felt good to stand in this chamber as something other than a prisoner. 8 months ago, I brought evidence to this council of poisonings disguised as natural deaths. I documented cases spanning 15 years where political rivals, inconvenient witnesses, and powerful Omegas died under suspicious circumstances. I showed patterns in the medical records that pointed to deliberate assassination. I looked at each council member in turn. I was exiled for dark magic before the sun set that day. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some of surprise, some of recognition. Drake's face remained carefully neutral. "What I didn't know then," I continued, "was that the conspiracy went back much further. Decades, possibly generations. That the systematic elimination of powerful Omegas and the extinction of war dogs were related parts of a plan to prevent the winter convergence, to stop the birth of truth-bearers who could expose every lie this council has built its power on." "This is fantasy," Drake said. "Omega dramatics." The golden pup made a sound. It was small, almost gentle, but it carried that same psychic weight as before, that same undeniable force. The air shimmered, and the truth began. This time, the visions were more focused, more precise. The pups were getting stronger, learning to control their gift. They showed Drake in a dozen different scenes, orchestrating murders, forging documents, manipulating council votes, showed him personally preparing the poison that killed Lucy's mate, showed him giving the order to have me exiled, showed him arranging accidents for Omegas whose healing abilities threatened his carefully maintained control, showed him standing over my grandmother's body and smiling. That image hung in the air longer than the others, made sure every person in that chamber saw it, understood it. When the visions released, several council members were openly weeping. Others looked ready to vomit. Drake was on his feet, face flushed, hands gripping the table hard enough to make the wood creak. "Lies," he snarled. "Manipulations. Whatever magic that creature is using. Truth-bearers cannot lie," the king said. His voice was soft, deadly. "That's the entire point of them. They show what is, not what you wish had been. Every memory you just saw was pulled from your own mind, Drake. Your own guilt, your own crimes. I did what was necessary. Drake wasn't backing down, wasn't pretending anymore. The Omega bloodlines were growing too powerful. The old magic was resurfacing. If left unchecked, they would have destabilized everything we built, everything we sacrificed for." "You mean everything you stole," I said. "Power that was never yours. Authority you maintained through murder and fear. You didn't build anything, Drake. You just hollowed out what existed and called it progress. His eyes found mine, and the hatred there was so pure it was almost admirable. You should be dead, starved or frozen or broken by now. That was the plan. Instead, you survived, and you've destroyed everything. No. The king stood. You destroyed everything the moment you started killing your own people. Rebecca just made sure everyone could see it. He gestured, and guards appeared from the shadows, not the council soldiers, but the king's personal guard, the ones who answered only to him. They moved toward Drake with the efficiency of people who'd been given very clear orders. Drake fought them, actually fought them, which was stupid because he was 1 alpha against 6. But he managed to get his hands on a guard's knife before they subdued him. You think this changes anything? Drake shouted, as they dragged him toward the door. You think executing me will fix the rot in this kingdom? I'm not the disease, boy. I'm just the symptom. There are dozens like me in positions of power, all of them protecting the same system. Kill me, and they'll just find someone else to do what needs doing. Then I'll keep killing until I find people who understand that murder isn't governance, the king said. Get him out of my sight. The doors slammed behind Drake and his guards. The council chamber fell silent. The king surveyed the remaining council members. Anyone else want to confess before the truth? Bearers share your secrets? No one moved. But I could see the fear now. The realization that everything they'd done in the shadows was about to be dragged into the light. Right. The king sat back down. Here's what's going to happen. Every member of this council will be investigated. Every decision you've made in the last 20 years will be reviewed. Anyone found complicit in Drake's conspiracy will be stripped of title and lands and exiled. And I do mean anyone. His gaze swept the room. I don't care how long you've served or how much you think you were helping. If you stood by while innocents were killed, you're done. He let that sink in. But, he continued, I'm not an idiot. I know I can't run a kingdom alone. So those of you who are actually innocent, who genuinely didn't know what was happening, you get one chance. One. To prove you can serve this kingdom honestly, starting with supporting the new laws I'm about to implement. He nodded to a clerk, who hurried forward with a stack of documents. Omega Protection Acts, the king said. Comprehensive legal frameworks ensuring that no Omega can be exiled, imprisoned, or executed without trial before a tribunal that includes other Omegas. That Omega healers are given the same authority and resources as Alpha physicians. That any Omega showing unusual abilities is protected and trained rather than persecuted. That war dogs, should any more be found, are treated as honored guardians rather than extinct curiosities. He looked at me. Rebecca Thorndike will oversee implementation of these acts in her new position as Royal Chief Healer, a position that outranks every other healer in the kingdom, a position that gives her a permanent seat on this council and the authority to question any medical decision made by anyone, including me. The silence in the chamber was deafening. I'd known he was planning to restore my title. I hadn't known he was planning to make me untouchable. Your Majesty, one of the council members ventured, an older beta woman who'd always seemed more interested in trade agreements than conspiracy. With all respect, elevating an Omega to council rank is unprecedented. So is a council conspiracy to commit genocide, the king said pleasantly. I'm in a mood to set new precedents. Any other objections? No one spoke. Excellent. Rebecca, do you accept? I looked at the council members. At their fear and their resentment and their careful calculations about whether opposing me would be worth the risk. Looked at Lucy, who was radiating smug satisfaction through our bond. Looked at the pups, who were watching everything with those knowing golden eyes. I accept, I said, on one condition. The king raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating with your king? I'm negotiating terms of employment. I kept my voice level, professional. You want me to implement protections for Omegas and oversee the medical integrity of the kingdom. That's fine. But I want it in writing that I have the authority to investigate anyone, pursue any suspicion, and publish my findings without interference. No council oversight. No requirement to run my conclusions past anyone before acting. If I think someone is being poisoned, I don't ask permission to find out who's doing it. Done, the king said immediately. And I want Lucy and her pups protected by royal decree. Declared sacred guardians of the kingdom with the full weight of law behind them. Anyone who harms them faces the same penalties as harming the royal family. Also done. And I hesitated, because this one was petty, but gods, I'd earned some pettiness. I want back pay for the 8 months I spent in exile, including hazard compensation for the assassination attempts and the blood magic and the impromptu war dog delivery in a blizzard. The king's lips twitched. You're invoicing the crown for saving the kingdom? I'm charging extra for the kingdom, saving, I said. The basic healer rate only covers standard services. He laughed. Actually laughed, and the sound transformed his face from intimidating king to someone younger and more human. Very well. I'll have my treasurer calculate appropriate compensation. Though I warn you, they're going to argue about the hazard multiplier. They can argue with my itemized list. I allowed myself a small smile. I'm very thorough. It's why you hired me. I want snacks written into law, Lucy said suddenly, projecting the thought to both me and the king with enough force to make us both flinch. What? The king said. If we're making new laws anyway, I want one that guarantees royal war dogs receive appropriate compensation in the form of premium meats and comfortable sleeping arrangements. Lucy's mental voice was completely serious. I've spent 2 days sleeping on floors. My back is ruined. The pups deserve better. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying not to laugh. She wants snacks and beds written into law. The king stared at Lucy. Lucy stared back, utterly unrepentant. I literally just dismantled a centuries-old conspiracy, he said. I'm currently planning the largest governmental restructuring in 3 generations. And you want me to add a provision about war dog snacks to the legal code? Yes, Lucy said firmly. The golden pup chirped her agreement. Her sisters joined in, creating a chorus of tiny voices that somehow felt official, important. The king looked at me. Can I refuse? She did save the kingdom too, I pointed out. And she's bonded to truth, bearers who can expose any lie you tell. So technically you could refuse, but everyone would know you were being ungrateful. He dragged a hand down his face. Fine. Article 7 of the War Dog Protection Act will include provisions for appropriate nutrition and housing. Happy? Ecstatic, Lucy said, and I felt her satisfaction wash through our bond like warm honey. Though I'd also like it on record that I expect regular brushing. My coat is a disaster. Don't push it, the king said, but there was warmth in his voice now, something lighter than the grief and rage that had been there before. He turned back to the council. We have work ahead of us. Years of work, probably. Undoing the damage Drake and his allies caused won't happen overnight. But it starts today, with these laws, with these protections, with the understanding that we serve the people, all the people, not just the ones who make us comfortable. He stood, and the council rose with him. Meeting adjourned. Rebecca, Lucy, please stay. We need to discuss security arrangements and make sure Drake's arrest doesn't trigger a countermove from any remaining conspirators. The council members filed out, some quickly, others lingering like they wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I didn't care. I was too busy trying to process everything that had just happened. 8 months ago, I'd stood in this chamber and watched my life get destroyed. Now I was standing here with more power than I'd ever had before, with protection, with purpose, with a war dog partner who wanted snacks written into law, and 4 impossible pups who'd rewritten the rules of what was possible. The king waited until we were alone, then seemed to deflate slightly. The performance dropped away, leaving someone tired and hurt, and trying very hard to do the right thing. Thank you, he said quietly, for saving them, for surviving, for being brave enough to open that door. I didn't have much choice, I said. It was help or become the kind of person who walks away from suffering. Most people would have walked away. Most people would have chosen survival over risk. He looked at the pups. You chose differently. The kingdom owes you everything. I thought about moldy bread and ceiling cracks and 8 months of slow erasure, about the grandmother I'd never gotten to say goodbye to, about every Omega who'd been systematically destroyed because they were inconvenient. The kingdom owes me a lot more than snacks and back pay, I said. But it's a start. The king nodded. Then let's make sure it's a start that leads somewhere worth going. Outside the windows, dawn was breaking fully now. The blizzard had passed. The sky was clear and bright and full of possibilities. I'd survived the night. We all had. And tomorrow, we'd start building something better. Or at least something with better snacks for war dogs. It was, I decided, a pretty good place to begin. The snow no longer bites when I step onto the balcony. That is how I know the mountain has changed. For most of my life, cold was punishment. Cold was exile, made physical wind cutting through thin fabric, frost seeping into bones. The land itself reminding me I did not belong. The mountain never softened for Omegas. It did not care if we were tired or hungry or afraid. But this morning, the air settles gently against my skin. Cool, yes, but not cruel. The sun rises slowly over the ridgeline, light spilling across the stone towers of the citadel like something tentative and new. Snow still clings to the peaks, but below, water runs. I can hear it, melted ice trickling through old channels that haven't known warmth in years. I press my palm against the railing and breathe. I am still here. I was not erased. Behind me, the doors open. I don't turn right away, I don't need to. I feel him before I hear him. Drake's presence is steady, unmistakable. Like gravity you stop noticing only because it's always been there. You're up early, he says. I smile, just slightly. So are you. He steps beside me, close enough that his arm brushes mine. Not claiming, not guarding. Just there. Equal space, equal ground. That alone still feels like a miracle. Below us, the courtyard stirs with quiet purpose. Workers move between buildings without fear of being shouted down. Warriors help carry supplies instead of barking orders. An Omega child runs past a line of sentries, laughing, and no one flinches. No one grabs her arm. No one tells her she doesn't belong in open spaces. I swallow hard. I keep waiting to wake up, I admit. Drake's gaze stays on the horizon. I know. There was a time when kings did not say things like that. There was a time when my thoughts would have been dismissed as weakness. Now, he listens. He always does. The reforms began the morning after the war ended. Not with speeches, not with ceremonies, with lists. Names, numbers, records pulled from locked rooms that were never meant to be opened. Omegas who had vanished. Punishments written off as protocol. Deaths labeled accidents. Drake read every single one. So did I. That was harder. There were nights I couldn't sleep, not because of fear, but because of recognition. I saw myself everywhere, in the margins, in the footnotes, in the spaces where explanation had been deliberately erased. When Drake abolished the old caste laws, the council argued. When he stripped ranks from alphas who had abused their authority, they shouted treason. When he ordered the protection decree binding, enforceable, irrevocable, the room went silent. Because this time, it wasn't just a promise. It was law. Omegas are no longer property. Omegas cannot be exiled without trial. Omegas have the right to refuse. Omegas have the right to speak. And when one council member dared to say it would destabilize the kingdom, Drake stood. This kingdom was already unstable, he said calmly. You just didn't feel it because you were standing on someone else's back. I was there. I watched the color drain from their faces. That was the moment I understood something fundamental had shifted. Not because the Alpha King loved an Omega, but because he believed us. A soft weight presses against my leg. I look down. Lucy sits at my feet, tail sweeping lazily across the stone. Her belly is still rounded, though less now, healing, strong. Her ears flick toward the sounds of the courtyard, alert but calm. No longer a war tool, no longer a weapon bred to obey and die. She lifts her head and huffs, unimpressed with the sunrise. I crouch and scratch behind her ear. She leans into the touch with a satisfied grunt. You're spoiled, I murmur. Drake snorts. She steals my side of the bed. Lucy's tail thumps once, unapologetic. I laugh an actual laugh, sharp and real, and the sound surprises me every time it happens. I used to keep laughter locked behind my teeth. It was dangerous to be noticed enjoying anything. Now, it echoes. Lucy was the first reform Drake made without realizing it. He didn't free her with a decree. He did it by kneeling in the dirt beside me while I stitched her wounds, his hands shaking as he held a lantern. By listening when I said she wasn't broken. By believing me when I said she was more than what they trained her to be. When she stood again, scarred but alive, the soldiers watched with something like awe. A war dog choosing gentleness. A kingdom followed. I straighten as bells ring across the upper towers low, resonant. Not an alarm, an announcement. The first official gathering of the new accord. I should be nervous. Months ago, I would have been sick with it. Standing before alphas, betas, omegas, standing where I was never meant to stand. But my fear feels different now. Sharper, cleaner. The kind that comes from knowing your voice matters. Drake offers his arm. He doesn't pull me in. He waits. I take it. We walk the halls together. Not ahead. Not behind. Together. The great chamber smells like stone and smoke. and something faintly green new banners hanging where the old sigils were torn down. The seating is different now. No elevated rows, no separation by rank, everyone on the same level, facing inward. It matters. I feel eyes on me as we enter. Some curious, some wary, some still resentful. Change doesn't erase history. It confronts it. I lift my chin anyway. Drake speaks first. His voice carries, calm and deliberate. This kingdom was built on strength, he says. But strength without conscience is rot. We mistook fear for order, silence for peace. He pauses. Lets it land. We begin again. When he gestures to me, my heart stutters, but I step forward. I was exiled, I say. No title, no embellishment, just truth. I was told my existence weakened this land, that my survival was charity. A murmur ripples. I lived long enough to see that was a lie. Silence now. Heavy. Listening. I don't stand here because I was chosen, I continue. I stand here because I refuse to disappear, because others like me never had the chance to refuse. I meet their eyes. One by one, this kingdom will be measured by how it protects those it once discarded. I step back. That's it. No applause. No cheers. Just stillness. Then one Omega stands. Then another. A Beta. A warrior. Slowly, deliberately, they lower themselves to one knee. Not for Drake. For the idea that survival is not shameful. My hands shake as Drake takes them in his. Later, after the chamber empties and the mountain breathes again, we return to the high paths above the citadel. The snow has retreated further now, exposing dark stone and stubborn green shoots pushing through. Life doesn't ask permission. Drake stops where the land drops away into the valley. You know, he says quietly, they wanted to carve your name into the records today. I blink. Mine? As consort, as symbol, as proof. And you said? I said the kingdom doesn't get to claim you the way it used to claim everything else. I look at him. Really look. And what do you want? I ask. He doesn't answer right away. I want you to choose, he says finally. Every day. Without obligation. The wind lifts my hair, carries the scent of thawing earth. I already did, I say. Lucy barks once, sharp and pleased, as if in agreement. Below us, the mountain continues to change, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily, honestly. I think of the girl I was, thin, quiet, told to be grateful for scraps. I think of the woman I am, not erased, not alone. Home. I.S. They tried to erase her. Instead, she became the reason the kingdom survived. Thank you for listening to another emotional, magical shifter romance here on Tina Romance Library. If you enjoyed today's story, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, so you never miss more powerful, heart-gripping romance stories.